5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour.
Welcome aboard. I'm your host Star, and this is Introspections. Hi guys. I hope you're all doing well today. I am a little stuck for words because I don't really know how to start a podcast. I kind of just grabbed my computer, headed into my closet, and hope for the best. So I hope this audio quality is good. Now, for those of you not familiar with me, my name is Star, and I have a small presence as of right now on social media, but I mainly come from YouTube, and I've been on there since 2018, creating videos like vlogs, some gaming content, as well as story times, and just honestly, a randomness of sorts. And that's kind of what this podcast is going to be. While I have a more direct approach, obviously the name is quite deep, Introspections, I definitely want to keep it as lighthearted and fun as possible. So instead of being as hectic as my YouTube videos, this will be a little bit more organized. I'll have a little bit of a script, per se, of the topics that I want to go over, and just a little bit more of a plan, rather than my videos that are kind of, whatever happens, happens. However, I can be a rambler, so forgive me if I start going off topics, because I'm sure that'll happen a lot. Now, if you're not familiar with me or my YouTube channel, like I said, my name is Star, and I'm based in New Jersey. So, kind of in the middle of what I'd like to think is in the middle of the New York metropolitan area. You're not in New York, so you're at least not in the mess of it all. You're right on the cusp of it, but you're also near places like Pennsylvania and not too far from Washington. I'd like to say New Jersey is a really good location. Some people might disagree. But besides that, I'm also in school, and I am a psych major. Not to say that I'm going to get really psychological on this podcast, but I could definitely say that a lot of my inspiration to start this podcast comes from my major. I joined my major because I wanted to help people and really learn more about others, which in turn would help me learn more about myself. And that's what I'm really excited about for this podcast, to really kind of dig deep into topics and get feedback from you guys and hear what you have to say about some topics we discuss. Now, you might be thinking, great, we know about you, we know a little bit about the podcast, but we want to know a little bit more, because how are you going to get into something that you don't really know a lot about? So, like I keep saying, this is going to be an in-depth yet lighthearted type of podcast. We're going to cover deep topics such as religion, racism, sexuality, misogyny, and so many more topics of that kind of category. But we're also going to have some fun and cover pop culture moments, hot topics, and all that kind of fun stuff that's going on in the world. Because a lot of the stuff that's going on in the world, we could also relate back to our daily lives and kind of break things down and really see what's going on. I think it's really important that we don't let life pass us by, and we take moments that are key in our lives and kind of break them down and analyze them, because it helps us learn more about ourselves and the world around us. Now, right now, it's just me, and I think that I could hold my own for a little bit. Like I said, I've been on YouTube for a little bit now holding my own, but I do have guests sometimes, and I will have guests on here sometimes as well. Mainly family or friends, but if I ever get the chance to, I'd love to have some guests that I find are inspirations in my life or can even give a different viewpoint. I think it's important not to just get one viewpoint, and as you see in the future when we get guests, my thoughts are going to be a lot different than a lot of other people's, so you're going to be able to see a lot of interesting conversations not too far in the future. Now, I think it's really important that this podcast, with us going over deep topics, that I do give a disclaimer. Now, I'm not going to give a disclaimer in every single podcast, not only because we're not going to be going over such deep topics in every single podcast, but also because I think it's not necessary, especially because the meaning of this podcast is going to be speaking for itself with the title. But I do want to foremost just speak and say anything that I talk about is specifically from my own experience. Whether it's something that I've had a friend come to me about and kind of discuss with me, or I've personally gone through, it's still all things that I can have an opinion on. If it's something that I can't relate to or I can't really talk about in depth, I'll make sure that I discuss that and mention that before even getting into the topic, because I think it's important that when you're discussing things that have nothing to do with you, you let the viewership know that, hey, I have no experience with this. I've never gone through this before, but I do have an opinion on it. And not to say my opinion has any validity, but I'd like to share, and maybe it could prove some thought-provoking conversations. I'd also like to say that this is a safe place. Now, that sounds really like cringy kind of, but it is a safe place. This place is not meant for any arguments, any loud, craziness going on. We're going to have fun in that aspect of loud craziness, but I don't want any of our conversations to get skewed or spun in negative narratives or to turn and go into really aggressive conversations. This is a placement for open conversations and open dialogue and open-mindedness and just accepting that other people have different opinions and we don't have to all agree, but we have to be respectful. Even if it's something that we completely think is nonsense, some things are, crossing the line like murder and such. But I think it's important that it's very rare we come along those people, and it's important to keep in mind that it's still the way they think, and it's not often that you can change someone's mind. So kind of settling with ourselves in the fact that, hey, this person thinks this way. It's absurd. But it's how they think, and we can't change that. Now, with all these disclaimers out of the way, I'm sure something bad will happen in the future in terms of conversations we cover that we don't cover in deep detail enough, or that was a really weird sentence, that we don't cover in enough details, or we just say the wrong words or anything like that. Again, I'm only human, and I'm really trying to go in this with as much respect and open-minded as myself. So please keep that in mind when we're discussing topics. Now, speaking of topics, a lot of the weeks that we are having these conversations, most of the times they will be pre-researched topics that me or a guest that has come on have chosen. However, I do want interaction from you guys. I think that it'll be the most fun if you guys are participating too. So if any of you guys ever have any ideas, please reach out to us on our social medias, Interstellar Introspections, or at our emails, interstellarintrospections@gmail.com. Now that we've gotten all the formalities out of the way, I think it's a perfect time to transition into our first conversation of the podcast. This conversation is a great starter because it is the title of the podcast, and it is Introspections. This word, this word is such an interesting word because it has literally so many meanings, yet one very simple one. The definition of introspections is the examination or observation of one's own mental and emotional processes. Now, to me, and quite literally, I would say that this has to do with kind of looking at oneself like you would in a mirror, but in your mind. So it's not something you can physically do, rather mentally process. Now, of course, with introspection, there's two other sisters that are very similar, yet they're different types of thought processes. So you have prospection or prospection, which is the act of anticipating, foresight, the act of viewing. So that's something we probably won't touch on much unless we're just messing around and talking about what we think might come in the future. But that's definitely more of something that isn't as in depth unless you're doing a scientific research situation and you're really trying to hypothesize that something is going to happen, therefore prospecting that something's going to happen. But in this podcast, we're not going to be doing much of that. Like I said, we might say, oh, we think this is going to happen in the future on a hot topic or something silly like that. But definitely nothing in depth or crazy like, oh my goodness, the world's going to freaking explode in 10 days. Nothing like that. And then, of course, we have retrospection. Now, retrospection is something that we will be touching on a little bit more than prospection or prospection, however one would say it. Because retrospection is the action of looking back on or reviewing past events or situation, especially those in one's own life. Now, this podcast is going to be a conversation about my own experiences, but like I mentioned, we will be discussing other experiences going on in the world because I do feel like it's important to analyze the world around us. Not only will it give us insight on the world around us, but also insight on ourselves and how we've grown and lived our lives. So because of this, retrospection is going to be very big for us because retrospection is so important in understanding our futures. How are we going to understand how to prevent negative things that happen in the past if we don't analyze our past behaviors and analyze the world's past behaviors and really break them down and not be ignorant to the fact that they happened, but rather be really open to the fact that they happened and really look at them and discuss why did this happen? What occurred for this to happen? And what can we do to prevent this from happening again? I really like the conversation of retrospection, and I really think that it's something that will be very big for us in the future, like I said, but for now, that's the basis of retrospection. It's also really important to find the good in things. So while retrospection, we're going to be analyzing the negatives and how to fix it, we're also going to be aware that there were positives that occurred in it. And while they might have not have been huge or big enough to really consider positive, they were still there and they're still valid in their own way. Now, back to introspection, because of course, that's really the main topic. Meditation and understanding oneself is key to having a successful introspection. Now, according to ideas.ted.com, there is a right way to be introspective. And that means that there is a wrong way. And let me tell you that I might have been doing it the wrong way this whole time. But to prevent this, we're going to go over what they talked about because I think it was a very interesting conversation they were having. I believe that the key to life is understanding others, because if you don't understand others, how are you going to be able to understand yourself? It's a very back and forth situation. Without one, you can't have another. It's like, what was first, the chicken or the egg? That's really cringy. Okay, anyway. Introspection stems from self-awareness. A topic that the article went over was confirmation bias and how this can hurt our introspections. A lot of times we'll be looking for an answer that will justify our thoughts, thus that being our confirmation bias, confirming a bias that we have. This is a problem with introspection because it's giving us an answer to something that might not even be true. We're trying to find an answer to, oh, why am I the best? Oh, I'm the best because this girl told me. Well, that's not really a good analysis on the situation. That's also a really bad example. But you get what I'm trying to say. We're using literally one piece of fact that just happened to occur to prove a really big statement like, I'm the best. Well, what's the scale of you being the best compared to everybody else? How strong is this person's answer compared to somebody that says you're not the best? There's so many variables. So avoiding that confirmation bias is very, very, very important. But besides confirmation bias, another topic that the article went over is asking too many whys. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I am at fault for asking so many why questions in my life. Do you guys ever lay down in your sleep and just ask a bunch of questions right before going to bed? Like, why this? Why that? Where am I? What am I doing today? Like, you're just asking so many questions to yourself. You don't even know what you had for dinner because your mind is going in so many places and you're just confused on life. While it is very hard to avoid these conversations, when you're really trying to dig deep into yourself and ask introspective questions, it's important to avoid these conversations at best, according to this article. This is because conversations that have why in front of it can spiral and circle around and around and around and really lead us nowhere. So instead of asking, why are we living? Ask, what is life worth living for? Obviously, you're going to get two different answers. Why are we living is a very complex and deep answer that none of us really know the answer to. I mean, we have our religious beliefs and science beliefs that kind of butt heads all the time. But in general, we really have no concrete evidence of where we're from. Nothing that 100% physically proves where we're from. Because of this, why are we living is such a circle question and is very bad to ask when we are being introspective. It's also a bad question to ask in general because I'm telling you, you're never going to find the answer. At least not for a long time. At least one that would satisfy me. Maybe you have found the answer in your own way and you're very satisfied with the answer you found. And I think that's a wonderful place to be. I sadly am not in the place. And so that's why I'm giving it as an example of a really bad round and round and round why question. But asking the question, what is life worth living for? Well, that's a question that might involve some confirmation bias, but also has a little bit more of a clear answer. We could also base this question off of morals and values in the general society. Or, again, going back to confirmation bias, you can use answers such as, oh, my family or my friends, and having that personal aspect to it, or going based off of morals and values like, what is life worth living for? Society bases life worth living for your children, supporting your wife or significant other or husband or whoever. There are a lot of societal norms that could answer the question, what is life worth living for? And so that's why it's a better question to ask than why are we living? Because even though it's a completely different answer and it's a different formulation of a question, it's still going to give you somewhat of an answer of why life is important, which is the general kind of, I guess you would say, topic of a question like this. No one's really asking why are we living unless they want to know why it's important. Why are we living is a question that you ask, and we can discuss this in another podcast because that question is so deep and we could go so many routes with this question. I don't want to, focus on the question too much, but this was just an example that I'd like to bring up because it is a deep question. And this conversation just proves the fact of how much it could round us in circles. And so that's why when you're trying to be introspective, ask what questions, not why. Now, with an understanding of introspections and the problems it can create, we are ready to dig deeper and really explore ourselves and the world around us. I open the conversation to you guys. Now, there's so many types of conversations one could have with oneself. And it's honestly fascinating how many times that I've had conversations with myself and either found answers to or didn't find any answers to, and I'm still trying to find answers to this day. And it's funny because a lot of the questions that I ask myself aren't even important questions half the time. They're questions that I ask when I'm bored or stressed, or simply questions that are so hard to find answers for that I really want to find the answer for, which is so bad because it goes back to that, circle mentality. I really propose the question to you guys, though. What are some introspective what questions that you can ask yourself to avoid those why questions that we ask ourselves? I cannot speak asks. I literally don't know what I'm saying. Why is life being so rough for me? What can I do to make life easier? I honestly feel like I sound like a freaking motivational speaker, and I hate that so much, but it's true. Think about the answers to those two questions that I ask. Why is life so hard for me, and what could I do to make life easier? Why is life so hard for me can be answered with a bunch of negatives that end up making you feel worse and worse and worse. And by the end of the day, and by the end of that thought, you're in a worse place than you were when you first started. Now, asking what can I do to make life better, you think of a lot of positives in your life, like I can go to meditation, I can go to therapy, I can create more me time if you like that personal alone time, or hang out with my friends more if you like that social interaction. A lot of more plans and positive thoughts come to your mind when you ask these what questions. Now, this isn't always the case. Obviously, the questions that I'm asking are a little bit, kind of one way or another. But what questions can also give you the hard reality of things too. Not just positives, but negatives. And sometimes negatives are the reality. But the what questions can really help you get down to the bottom of things. Rather than asking, why did grandma pass away? You would ask, what caused grandma to pass away? Now, these questions sound very very similar, but there is a definite answer to what and a more shadowy one to why. Why is a question that we usually ask to ourselves when a loved one has passed away. Like, why did this happen? But if we really break it down to the what, there could be health reasons. There could be really sad reasons, like murder or anything really disheartening like that. And this is a answer that isn't really going to be positive. It's still going to be sad that grandma passed away. There's not going to be a happy ending to it. But maybe, just maybe, that what answer will make one feel a little bit better about the situation rather than keeping themselves running in circles asking why. You find the answer to the what, and it just gives you a little bit more clarity on the situation. Well, guys, I really hope I got your mind turning and your thoughts going, because this was just episode 1, and it was just a short introductory episode to kind of introduce yourself to me and the kind of conversations we're going to be having on this podcast. I hope you're able to kind of take this journey with me and really teach me about life. That's what this is about. It's about teaching each other and giving each other new experiences. And I'm hoping that you guys will share your experiences with me. Now, not every episode is going to be this short, and not every episode is going to be an hour long. I'm only one person, and while I have a tendency to kind of go off on tangents for a pretty long time, an hour long of tangents could get a little, how you say, boring. So because of this, my podcasts are going to range from about 20 to 50 minutes, depending on the interest topic. So for today's episode, because it is just an introductory and we're going over just a short little topic, I want to keep it bite-sized. That way you guys can get a feel of it and see if you're going to be able to tune in for the next one. A schedule is not made for this podcast yet because we're just starting out. I do plan on releasing at least once a week. And once we kind of get that situated, we'll create a finalized schedule. But as of right now, it's primarily based on viewership. But we do have a few weeks lined up of content, so I hope you guys stick around for the weeks coming. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate your time. And once again, keep thinking. Never stop. Our brains were given to us for a very special reason, and our brains are so powerful that we are able to have these thought-provoking conversations and these really meaningful thoughts to ourselves. What, whys, when, where, whos, and hows are vital into asking the most groundbreaking questions in the world. And who knows, you might be the next why answerer. And a lot of those why questions, as we could tell, aren't easy to answer. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Interstellar Introspections, and I hope to see you guys on this space soon. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.